I understand, but you should literally need to make it.
Keep on the ground. Yeah. I'd rather be more stealing from myself. Leave at least two. Leave at least
Wow, really? Okay, are you guys ready to start? I think they can hear us and they can see us.
What I did miss. So I had the
Nice. So, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. I wish you all who are out there can see how many wonderful people that we have in here for a magnificent family service, a Shabbat service. School's out? Is school out? Yes! So we have so much rest and fun and recreation to celebrate. And we open by saying, isn't it cool that we're all here together? Does anyone know how to sing Hine Matov in this room? No? Nobody knows it? Hine Matov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. And in our Shabbat Torah portion, we are told that we should learn how to kindle lights, because when it's dark outside, we need, it's not quite dark outside, but when the Sabbath descends fully, our candles will be needed. And so I wonder if my airplane crew could leave the hangar and go all the way up there and light some candles. You might wonder why they are an airport group. We got a lot of good stuff going.
Okay, who's gonna light Lucas?
You want to go light the Shabbat candles? Just be careful of the cord. Okay. Too bright, huh? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner V'ha'adlik ner shel Shabbat. Thank you. The words of the blessing are written all over their little angelic faces. They say that Sabbath angels follow us home, and indeed, the blessings are written across their faces. So if we stand up, because some of us are still up, we do our call to worship, which is the first prayer of the service. You want to do it? Oh, no, I can do the update later. It's Shabbat. We don't want to update on Shabbat, right? Baruch hu et Adonai hamavorach. Baruch Adonai hamavorach le'olam vahed. Our first prayer says that we have to open by remembering that it is God we bless. And then we state that God is one with the words of the Shema. We say that's like the central prayer. You're supposed to say it every day when you go to bed and every morning when you get up. And we say it throughout the day. And people say it at all times. So we continue. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Hear Israel, Adonai, our God is one God, and we all proclaim that, and we are seated. If God is one God, you're staying right there? Okay. If we know there's only one God, and it's the same God for all people, no matter what churches, synagogues, or mosques they go to, they're all praying to the same God. And the statement in Deuteronomy which follows tells us how we act in our life to affirm that God is one. Now, we sing it in Hebrew, so we may not remember all that it means, but it speaks about being good and learning and studying and listening to our parents and following God's laws all the time.
I feel like that's everyone. That's kind of all of them.
That's right. That's everybody. So when we chant it in Hebrew, we're learning how someday we're going to chant our Torah portions. This is the tune. You disagree? Yeah. Actually, I win this one. Listen, I'll tell you why. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavcha hayom al levavecha Vishinantahan levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shivtecha b'veitecha uvlechtecha b'derech uvshochbecha uvkumecha ukshartam leot al yadecha v'hayu latotafot b'neinecha uktavtam al mezuzot beitecha uvisharecha leman tizkeru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'hitem kedoshim lelohechem ani Adonai Elohechem Asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim lihyot lachem le'Elohim ani Adonai Elohechem. And our blessings so far have told us that we should bless God and realize that no matter what we work for all week and what we do all week, it really is all for the same purpose, to live a good life and to remember to bless God and give thanks to God for our blessings. Our Shema reminds us that we are like every other human being on earth, and we all have this God in common. And then we turn to our Micha Mocha prayer, which says no matter who we are and where we live, we have to bring freedom to all people. So we are told, standing on the parted shores, we still believe what we were told, or what we always believed ever since we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, and that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness. There is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together. And so when the Israelites left slavery and became a free people, they sang, Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nehda b'kodesh, no ra tehilot oseh feleh, no ra tehilot oseh feleh, malchutecha ra'uvanecha bokeh hayam lifnei Moshe v'Miriam ze'eli anu v'amru Adonai imloch Adonai imloch le'olam v'ahed. And now that we have established all that, we go to the second part, or the third part of the service, which is our standing prayer. And so we all rise if we can, or are willing to, or want to, and we sing, Adonai sifatai tiftachu fi yagid tehilatecha. Eternal God, open my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei Avotenu ve'Imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzhak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, ve'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibur v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomer Chasadim Tovim, V'Konei Hakol, V'Zocher Chastei Avot V'Imahot, Umevi Gula Livnei V'Neihem, Laman Shemo Ba'ahava, Melech Ozer Umoshia Umagen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham ve'Ezrat Sarah, Atah Gibur le'olam Adonai, Mechayei hakol atarav lahoshia, Mechalkei chayim b'chesed, Mechayei hakol berachamim rabim. So make noflim v'rofei cholim, Umatir asurim, umakayeh memunato, lishenei afar, michamocha ba'al givurot, umido melach, melech memihit, umakayeh, umatmiach Yeshua, V'ne'eman atah lahachayot hakol, Baruch atah Adonai, mechayeh hakol. Atah kadosh v'shimcha kadosh, u'kadoshim b'chol yom yahalelucha selah, Baruch atah Adonai, ha'el hakadosh. And we are seated. We talked about the God of our ancestors, and just as They had a relationship with God, so we hope that we carry on their tradition, that God is mighty and powerful, and God is holy and special. And then we end our Amidah prayer with hopes for peace and healing for all people. There once was a man who stood before God, and his heart was breaking. His name was Lucas. Stand up, your heart is breaking. His heart is breaking from the pain and injustice of the world. Can you read that?
Dear God, he cried out, look at all this suffering, the anguish and distress in your world. Why don't you send help?
And God responded and said, I did. I sent you. And that means Lucas is responsible for peace in the world, but let's give him a little help by singing the prayer. Shalom Rahav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam. Shalom Rahav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam. Ki atahu melech adon lechol hashalom. Ki atahu melech adon lechol hashalom. Shalom rahav al Yisrael amcha tasihim le'olam. Shalom rahav al Yisrael amcha tasihim le'olam. V'tov be'enecha levarech et amcha Yisrael b'chol eit u'b'chol shah b'shlomecha. Shalom rahav al Yisrael amcha tasihim le'olam. Shalom rahav al Yisrael amcha tasihim le'olam. Tasihim le'olam. Tasihim le'olam. And we ask for peace and healing, not only for our entire world, but also for our families and those individuals in our midst who are ill, in need of strength, healing, or wholeness. And so we take a moment and consider the many people who could use our strength and our prayer and our healing, and we pray for them that the one who brought healing to our ancestors will bring healing and strength, even if it's not a cure, the strength to endure whatever we are enduring, with our Misha Beirach prayer. Misha Beirach Avotenu Mikor habracha lavotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misheberach imotenu mekor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. So I just found a new genre, pieces of literature with stories that I had never heard before, written a little bit later than the Bible, but legends that were passed down from ancient documents about some of our greatest heroes, including a giant collection of stories about King Solomon. King Solomon, we say, is perhaps the wisest of all people. And he also, with a lot of tradition, said that he had a lot of magic at his beck and call as well. And this is the story of when King Solomon stood at the entrance of the Cave of Ages. Tradition had it in mystical literature that this was the secret portal to the beyond, and that King Melchizedek, who was the priest of God on high, El Elyon, who was a buddy of Abraham, he lived in this cave for all time. In fact, sometimes he went down there and he met Adam, and he met Enoch, and he got all kinds of wisdom. So we don't know where Solomon went, but he went to this Cave of Ages. Some people say it's in the way north at Mount Tabor. Some people think that it's right around the Galilee area on Mount Hermon, and some say no, it's down by the Dead Sea in the Qumran caves. So if you find the Cave of Ages, let us know. But only Solomon knew where this was. And his crown was glinting and flickering in the torchlight, and he said, "You wish to see me?" And Melchizedek said, "Yes, come in. I have some pictures for you to see and a problem for you to solve." Melchizedek continued, "Solomon, I understand that you had a record number of worshipers at the temple that you built last week. It's hard to even imagine Jerusalem without your great, beautiful temple. But we don't know how long this sanctuary will endure." And Solomon answered, "The temple is in the hand of God." However, Melchizedek looked pensive and he said, "Yes, it's true. You have built something of historic importance, but aren't you curious of what the future will hold for it? Take a look." And Melchizedek clicked his remote control, and a giant screen on the cavern lit up the wall. And he said, "This first picture that you're looking at shows Mount Moriah 20 years ago. That's prior to when you built the temple. As you can see, the city of your father David is right there, but on the very top of the mountain, there is nothing of a temple yet. And in fact, at the very top of the mountain is that which our tradition calls the foundation stone. The mountain stands on this stone, a holy site, not just for you, but for later religions as well. I was there when Abraham prepared his son to go up to Mount Moriah and got ready to sacrifice him. Later scholars will say that their prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven there. And another group will say that this is where their God's son was offered as a sacrifice for all people's sin. Now Solomon looked very confused. Could it be? Solomon didn't know what he was talking about. So Melchizedek said, "Okay, never mind. Here is what you, Solomon, built. This is what you built around that sacred rock. It is your awe-inspiring temple, and you should be so proud of your achievement. But let's look into the future. The next picture shows your temple 2 centuries from now. The temple is here, but the holy shrine is showing its age, and the people are outgrowing the space. Time has taken a toll on this temple for the ages, even though your architect said it would last forever. Now brace yourself. You're going to be upset, Solomon. But look at this. 4 centuries later on Mount Moriah." And Solomon let out a gasp. And Melchizedek said, "You are viewing the ruins of the temple. For God's house will be plundered and razed by Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. He will conquer Jerusalem, and the people are being dragged into exile, and they won't have a central temple in which to worship. Now don't worry too much, because they are clever people, and they will come up with the idea, something else where they could meet and they could pray. I think they're going to call it something like a synagogue." However, take a look at this. Like the phoenix, the mystic bird that is reborn from its ashes, there will be a new temple, and it will rise from those ruins. Behold, the second temple. Under the auspices of their next conqueror, Cyrus of Persia, the Israelites will be allowed to go back, and they will build a sanctuary. And I know, Solomon, it's not as beautiful as yours. It's much more modest. No bronze, no gold, no cedar, no ivory, but at least the Jewish home for God is reestablished on the mount. However, conquerors come and go, and a few centuries later, Alexander the Great, a Macedonian Greek, will add Jerusalem to his empire, and one of his successors will put the Greek god Zeus right on your altar and force the priests to sacrifice pigs to Zeus. Fortunately, the Maccabees will be able to liberate it and rededicate a temple later for all time. And they'll always mark that rededication of this temple with the holiday called Hanukkah. And then in time, the second temple will be rebuilt. Yes, the Romans are there now, but Herod the Great, who works for them, said it had to be fixed up. He was called Herod the Great not because he was great, but because he had a great many building projects like gyms and hippodromes and theaters. And he built this new temple, and he called it Herod's temple, not your temple, Solomon. Don't get too upset, because he also messed up a lot. He put in a golden eagle, which was the insignia of Rome, at the main gate. And that's because Herod answered to Rome. Ultimately, a war broke out between the Jews and Rome, and the result, again, was more death and destruction. Here's Herod's temple. That rubble will be destroyed and will be reduced to piles of bricks that will just sit there. And the only thing left on the mountain is going to be one wall that was the retaining wall on which the temple stood. For many Jews, later called the rabbis, they would say, we don't need this spot. We don't need a house for God. Atonement and closeness to God will be replaced by prayer and study and loving kindness. For others, they will always hope that God's promise will come true again, because God said to Zechariah that God will again return to this holy mountain. Several centuries will pass, and the Romans will stick a statue of a Roman Empire up there and worship Jupiter for a little bit. And then after that, the Holy Roman Empire under Constantine will become Christian, and they built a domed building located very close to the mount, and they call it Anastasis, or Resurrection. It's a Christian church. I know you don't know what Christianity is. We don't need to go into it. However, suffice it to say that on this site, the church says that the execution of Jesus of Nazareth took place, and that in fact Jesus' death was the sacrifice that means we don't need Jewish sacrifice anymore. And the Anastasis overlooks the ruins of the temple to say, we're in charge now, and will physically replace the temple to Aphrodite and Jupiter, as well as Judaism. Now, I know, Solomon, you don't get any of this. However, just so you know, later on, next to it, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre will be there, and indeed will continue in this place. But our journey through time continues. Think about this. Here is the next picture. The rubble was cleared away, and Omar ibn Belakib, conquered from Arabia, took Jerusalem under the banner of a brand new religion called Islam. Founded by Muhammad, Islam revered the Mount also as the site that Muhammad went up to the heavens. And so Omar restored the sanctity of the Mount. He built his own house of prayer. It would be called the Dome of the Rock, which wasn't finished till later when his successor, Abd al-Malik, came. And here we see that even inside, do you see that the rock, the foundation rock, comes up from the floor, even while the beautiful mosque was built around it. The dome, you don't see it? If you look on the middle of the floor, it's a big giant slab of stone, which they say is the top of Mount Moriah, where all these holy things happen, and the sanctuary is built around it.
It's just harder to picture out because, like, the rest of the floor isn't the greatest, flat. So it's hard to tell which is a slab of
And
stone that's built around him, which is just a regular slab of stone.
probably it's the very top of the mountain and curved, and no one walks because you can see that there's rails around it, and people would stand around it. Jews don't go into this mosque anymore. They're not allowed in, and so it's interesting to see a picture of this.
No, I'm right here.
I know you are. The dome, according to Islam, would replace the temple, Constantine's church, and the temple of Jupiter, and outdo it in splendor. And Abd al-Malik will be so proud that he will say, "Behold, I am a man greater than Solomon here." Now, Solomon looked pretty upset at that. While the adherents of Islam will proclaim the divine presence, the Jews will say, "You know what? God's presence never left us." And so they continued to meet at the wall which falls underneath the dome. And they said this, even though it's just a retaining wall, even though this isn't a wall of the temple, but just a platform on which the temple stood, God still lives here at the western wall. And they will revere the wall, and they would pray there. And in fact, they would cry for the day that they could build their temple again. And that's how it became known as the Wailing Wall.
That's paper.
Nope, it's not paper.
It looks like it's paper.
I know it does, but it's a screen. The dome here is 1 century later, and you think it's unchanged, but it's cut off at the top, but you won't believe it. But now the crescent of Islam was changed because the church came and during the Crusades took this and named it Templum Domini and built a little portico in front of it. And finally, the Turks came in led by Saladin. And a guy named Suleiman the Magnificent said, "We're going to finish this and make the most beautiful building you've ever seen." And Solomon, don't worry, because Suleiman was named for you. And Suleiman will even repair the Jews' measly wall, clearing away the debris and allowing an enclave for prayer. And they call that wall Al-Barak, lightning, because Muhammad's winged horse was named Al-Barak, and he tethered this horse to this wall. And so here we come, Solomon, said Melchizedek, to the final picture. And here is the mount in the 21st century, and Muslims and Jews share this city, and Christians too, but a violent antagonism exists between them. The focal point of their conflict is that very rock, that very spot. The Harim al-Sharif, or the noble sanctuary, to the Muslims, and the Temple Mount to the Jews. And it's this holy place, the gateway to heaven, we are told. Everybody reveres the site, and no one can figure out a way to share it. Some Jews want to build a third temple upon the mount, and this enrages the Muslims. And the Muslims want to keep the Jews from walking up on the spot, and this enrages the Jews. So how are we going to figure this out? Melchizedek looked at Solomon and said, "You are supposed to be the wisest of all people, Solomon. You have solved the most difficult of cases. Here's what I want to ask you. How can this mountain be shared? How can it serve all parties? How can this rival be resolved? What is your answer, if you can even come up with an answer? I need you to think about this, and if you ever come up with an idea, come back to me." And so Solomon thought, and he thought, and he thought. And suddenly he thought he came up with an answer. Anybody have an answer that Solomon might have come up with? Can anyone think of Solomon's answer to solve this huge problem? Yes.
Well, either put them both there or put neither of them there.
So Solomon went back to Melchizedek, and he woke him up, and Melchizedek said, "What are you doing here, Solomon?" And he said, "I think I have an answer. And I thought about a lot of things. Like, I thought maybe we should just get rid of both of them so people just don't have to fight over that spot anymore. But that doesn't serve anybody's purposes. We need holiness. And what about their sharing the very spot? They seem to fight every time they share the spot. So that perhaps isn't an answer either." And so Solomon said, "Look, there's no good answer. However, here's what I think. The situation is dire. The two parties are at odds over the mount. They are fighting all the time. And finally, I thought, you know what? What is the essence of our holy spot? What is its prime function? What is it there for? A number of things came to mind. We visit the temple to pray to God and to give thanks to God and to praise God and to feel God's presence and to ask for forgiveness when we've done things wrong. We go there to sacrifice. We bring offerings on the altar in homage to God. To teach, we bring what we earn. We bring our livelihood. We bring our luxuries and say, you know what, God, even you are more important than any of those things. However, if the temple were restored, we would probably go back to giving sacrifices to God, and maybe we would feel closer to God. And Melchizedek said, yes, obviously. And so Solomon said, here is my solution. Perhaps in this time of contention, God would prefer a different sort of sacrifice. And my solution is this: sacrifice the temple itself. What? Boomed Melchizedek. Just hear me out, said Solomon. God yearns for peace among humans, and yet God's very house is the place where we fight the most. So why don't we just relinquish it, let it go? Surely the Lord of the universe is big enough to live without a house, and would surely be pleased by our giving up that which is most precious to us. That is my idea. How did I do? Since you can see into the future, Melchizedek, show me the next slides. Show me the pictures of what happens. And the priest said, I must refrain from further comment, for you see the rivalry over the mountain is no accident. It is history. It is part of God's plan, a test, just as God once tested Abraham. What kind of a test? Solomon asked. And Melchizedek said, of the human capacity to resolve differences. Can bitter enemies find peace with one another? Can they figure out how to share this holy site? Will they place its sanctity ahead of their own greed? It is a test for all human beings. Let's hope that we can work things out. And so this is a story without an ending. It is the ending that we must write. And you guys, your moms, and your dads and your rabbis and teachers have not figured it out. And so we are going to have to leave it to you, the next generation, to figure out how there is a way for us to share our land and keep our relationship with God, even when everyone wants that space enough to fight for it. And so the words that come to mind that perhaps Solomon was hoping for are peace, is how we say it in English. Salam is how we say it in Arabic or in the Muslim language, and shalom for peace. Do you know? Peace, salam, shalom. Peace, salam, shalom. Peace, salam, shalom. Peace, salam, shalom. We believe in peace. We believe in peace. We believe in peace, peace, salam, shalom. We will work for peace. We will work for peace. We will work for peace, peace, salam, shalom. We can live in peace. We can live in peace. We can live in peace. Peace, salam, shalom. And that is our prayer for you. And we look forward to someday being really, really, really old, and seeing how it is that you help fix this world and find a way for peace, salam, shalom. And that is the vision of the Aleinu prayer. And so we rise together and say these words. Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol, latet gedula liotzer breshit, shalo asanu kagoye haratzot, velo samanu kamishbachot ha'adama, Shelo sam chelkenu kahem, v'gohor aleinu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu korim, umishtachavim umodim, lifnei melech malchei hamlachim, kadosh baruch hu. And while we are up, we remember those who stood before us, and those who praised God, and those who fought and sought to bring peace. We remember our beloved not to be sad, but to remember. Our sorrow that accompanies their deaths does not diminish the joyful gift that was their lives. We remember their kindness and their nobility and their goodness. They taught us to live and love, inspiring us through the grace of their best selves. They have showered us with love and light, and as we remember them in our Kaddish prayer, we bring their light back to raise up our heavy hearts. These we remember. Claudette remembers Hershey clearly, because she just stood up and mentioned his name. And we add these yahrzeits: Jacob Orlinsky, Harold Shane, Janet Binstein, Esther Brauman, Herbert Bromberg, Elaine Reinblum, Anita Rendler, Mary Lemon, Robert Merritt, Margot Freed, Elizabeth Krukey, Bess Krukey-Newberger, and Mandy Rendler. We remember them all with our own, and we give thanks for their lives with our Kaddish prayer. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, v'yalma divrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, v'agala uvizman kariv imru. Amen. Yehei shemei rabbah mivarach le'olam ulalmei almaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpo'ar v'yitroman v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei d'kudusha berichu. La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechemata da'amiran bi'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shalom rabba min shamaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Osei shalom b'mramav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. May the one who makes shalom on high give us the strength to work for and make peace here on earth, for Israel, for our nation and our world, for all the world, and we say amen. And we are seated.
I think it's cool that the smoke just shows on the projector. Like, we can't see it with our eyes, but when we look on the projector, it just shows the smoke.
I like watching the candles go down through the time. So, a few announcements. Everybody wants to come next week because we're going to thank all the volunteers at the temple, and we have a really yummy oneg, mostly chocolate, next
I'm
week.
gonna miss it.
Oh.
I'm going to camp.
And then the next week we have our picnic. We're going to be outside. It's going to be a beautiful day. We're going to grill hot dogs, hamburgers, and veggie burgers and things, and have fruits and vegetables and all kinds of goodies. And we're going to do our service outside in the JCC tents, and it's going to be fabulous. Anybody else have any good and welfare? No? Okay, I know you all miss coming to Sunday school. I'll be here on Sunday morning if you want to stop by and have a lesson or two. Yay. Maybe, maybe not. So let's sing Osei Shalom to close out our service. Osei Shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru, ve'imru, amen. Ya'aseh shalom, ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, Yahaseh shalom, Yahaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Yahaseh shalom, Yahaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom. Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom. Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. And we say,
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom to one and all. Woo! Play ball.
Yay.
Wesley, do not do that. They're being secret. There.
Saw that. I saw your little legs back and forth and back and forth.
You can't do that. Right away. Yeah. Didn't you move? I did. So why are you here? No, we can hang out. Can we go to the bedroom? I won't do that. I'm so tall. We can? How old are you? 11. How old are you? 11.
Sorry, did I get your mic?
I don't know. You're short for my age. I thought you were yeah, that's my crazy brother that was on screen. Wait, how old is this? Wes! He was 2 last time we saw him. Mom! Mom! You look like a little baby. Yeah, he's really big. We win. Oh, you won?
Yeah.
I think I didn't realize how much I missed. Yes. Okay. We did. It was nice. Yeah, you did. We went to the park. We're leaving